The neighborhood of San Saba sits on a little mound next to the Aventine hill, hence its nickname Il Piccolo Aventino or the Little Aventine. It's a sunny, cheerful and open location close to the Piramide and Porto San Paolo on the south side and adjacent to Circus Maximus and the Baths of Caracalla on the northern side. On the Lanciani plan, besides the Aurelian walls, we can see a piece of the Servian walls, which crossed the neighborhood during Imperial Rome. Here near what is now the Viale Aventino, we see the former Vicus Piscina Publica, an ancient road which marks the border between the two Augustan regions, the 13th, Aventine, and the 12th, San Saba.
The population of San Saba in imperial times was, like today, socially very mixed. It was a densely inhabited site before the city started to shrink from about 1 million people to less than 60,000, and the little hill turned into open countryside. After the fall of Rome in the 5th century, it was abandoned and returned to nature. Let's look at the church and monastery which gives the neighborhood its name. San Saba dates back to 645, when fugitive monks from the Mar Saba monastery in Palestine, between Jerusalem and the Dead Sea, arrived in Rome and settled in an old domus on the hill. In the 8th and 9th centuries, this was one of the most prestigious among the so-called Greek monasteries in Rome.
This beautiful church with exquisite paving is located on the peak of the hill, surrounded until the early 20th century with nothing but vineyards and orchards.
It's much greener now than in ancient times. It's hard to believe that we are inside the Aurelian walls. Look on the Noli plan. Until the 20th century, this site was surrounded by green space.
When this church was built, the area had already been developed and abandoned once, and few relics remained of its previous liveliness beyond imposing walls and thermal baths nearby. In the Renaissance, new neighborhoods are planned in central Rome, and after 1870, the new Italian capital redevelops many abandoned areas, but San Saba stays virgin territory really until 1907.
1907, that was the year when a new mayor, Ernesto Nathan, was elected as part of the Blocco Popolare.
This political change brought about urban improvements and finally provided the city with needed infrastructure like public facilities, schools, hospitals, and power and gas plants. A new master plan was laid out which protected green areas and parks. Taxes were asked in return for construction licenses, and funds were given to the Istituto Case Popolari, the Institute of Low-Income Housing, or ICP for short, which would build one of its first experimental housing projects right here in San Saba. San Saba, in fact, became a model neighborhood, anticipating the ideas of the 1909 master plan, in which the typology of the villini, or small urban villas, was introduced for the first time. A group of young architects employed in the ICP were eager to develop utopian models for workers' quarters, and the villino type fit their needs.
The plan was strongly influenced by the Garden City movement, which was taking off in these years. English city planner Ebenezer Howard coined the term Garden City as an alternative to the terrible, polluted industrial cities like London, but also to the poverty of rural life. Here is his famous three magnets diagram, contrasting the foul air and high rents of the town with the lack of amusement and low wages of the country. His alternative is the planned town country, the best of both worlds, high-quality housing for workers, surrounded by green space. But in England and America, the practical application of Garden City ideas often ended up as suburban enclaves, with little order and even less sense of community. Raymond Unwin's Letchworth in England lacked the planning rigor and is more about individual private property. Here in Rome, however, the tradition of civic space is still very present.
The lovely sunny hillside of San Saba seems an ideal location for this utopia. And more so, the workers' quarters are in close vicinities of the factories and municipal plants of Ostiense and Testaccio. There we find the municipal slaughterhouse, the big wholesale markets, the gasworks, the electrical power plants, the river port, and warehouses, just like in ancient times. My question though is, can we actually talk about the Garden City movement? After all, Rome had many municipal services, but almost no industries.
Yeah, that's right. Rome at the time had no industrial slums. On the contrary, it was really a provincial town, immersed in a beautiful countryside. Instead of factories, you find convents, churches, aqueducts, and all sorts of ancient ruins. Nevertheless, some areas of Rome, like Testaccio and San Lorenzo, did have an infant mortality rate of over 50% and witnessed a lot of misery and poverty.
In fact, it was to address the immense problem of lack of housing for the less fortunate that the ICP was founded in 1903. The National Institute was granted public funds to construct many low-income neighborhoods in the capital, as we can see from this map of the ICP. Look at this first master plan of San Saba drafted by the ICP architects and submitted to the City Hall. It shows a low-density plan composed of many loosely arranged villini on a green hillside. 7 buildings fill each lot, all arranged around the central Piazza Bernini. If we examine the proposed buildings, we count 20 housing units, each of them 2 stories high, with a front and a backyard. The low-density layout of the townhouses is surrounded by lots of green space, providing for plenty of air and direct sunlight. This is exactly what the young ICP architects dreamed of: healthy, utopian dwellings for working classes.
Notice how the housing units are very comfortable. They're quite large and all have individual entrances from the street and garden. They're the opposite of public dormitories. Each house has 3 bedrooms on the upper floor, 2 rooms below with a large kitchen, toilets, and even a large basement. The low-density layout combined with rather large-size apartments on 3 levels is clearly a very luxurious and costly model for low-income houses, not to speak of the prestigious central location.
You're right, Tom. Not surprisingly, San Saba is a very sought-after place to live today.
Yes, in fact, while the ICP houses are still rent-controlled, all other areas of San Saba and the nearby Aventine have seen skyrocketing real estate prices and are affordable only to the very wealthy.
Being one of the first ICP neighborhoods to be built, hopes were high, and the design acted as a kind of manifesto to contrast the cramped, dark, unhealthy worker housing that had existed previously. The ICP architects set the rules. They wanted separate bedrooms for the parents and children, large kitchens, built-in toilets, sunny rooms with cross-ventilation, and a place to hang the laundry. There were even to be small orchards and common playgrounds for the children. We can also observe that the townhouses are built with high-quality, long-lasting materials, brick and stone such as tuffo, peperino, and travertine. Again, the architects are pointing their finger at the short-sighted speculators who were constructing cheap and shabby workers' shacks on the outskirts of Rome, hoping to make some quick money with no long-term vision or accountability.
The ICP, by contrast, invested major resources, and not only for the construction of the houses themselves, they wisely used a large part of the funds for the urbanization of the area. Unlike many other neighborhoods of Rome, San Saba had paved streets, sidewalks, drinking fountains, and a piazza within a little park, all conceived from the very beginning. The essential design idea in San Saba was to produce single housing units which can be repeated and thus create a sort of industrial or serial production. You see that the same unit can be combined in double or quadruple townhouses. This serial method facilitates production. It simplifies the construction process and thus lowers the overall cost. But soon it became clear that the Villini model itself was too costly, too luxurious for the limited density it produced. It simply didn't provide enough housing for Rome's then growing lower income classes.
As a result, in 1910 the layout changes. In Lotto 1 and 3 the first condominium buildings are erected. These palazzine, typically 4 to 5 stories high, usually hold 4 apartments per staircase. So compared to the 2-story Villini types, the ICP was able to triple or quadruple the number of flats. We can see in a second phase how the higher palazzini fortify the corners of the lots and create a protective edge to the inner, slimmer villini. The hybrid combination of villini and palazzine makes the block lighter and brighter and more permeable for sunshine and airflow. Lotto 7 and 8 were the last to be completed before 1914, when the First World War broke out and all of the construction came to a halt.
After the war, problems with groundwork and restricted funds brought continued delays. Only in 1921 did works resume. Once more, the model changed to a denser urban layout, and housing units were designed smaller in order to increase the number of homes. The courtyards became smaller and tighter, but the concept of repeating the units to speed up the construction process and lower the cost continued successfully.
In this plan, highlighting the palazzina, one can see how many times the same unit has been repeated, in many flexible ways, either attached or detached to each other, shifted or adapted for corner solutions, with the result that the urban solutions for this little neighborhood felt very coherent and harmonious in height, volume, and in size. Unlike other ICP quartieri, where there were many different architects involved, in San Saba, Quadrio Pirani was the sole designer for the whole project. His well-defined architectural vocabulary is evident throughout the entire residential area. Not surprisingly, he used mostly brick. After all, his father was a master mason. Pirani experiments early on with the countless possibilities of brick construction. He knows how to twist, to turn, to shift, and to spin them in the most imaginative and ingenious ways.
Bricks remind us of factories and warehouses, familiar to workers, hence an appropriate reference, no?
Yes, definitely. Brick is certainly a resistant and affordable material, thus used in utilitarian buildings. Yet the way Pirani uses it, it looks much more noble and grand. He creates such elegant window frames and splendid cornices.
He seems to be playing on historical architectural references, both to the Aurelian walls nearby and the monumental ruins of the Baths of Caracalla. Look at the corner building on Via Bramante, where you see the elaborate details. Also on Via Giacomo della Porta, or the finest of all, this one on Via Borromini. You discover how Pirani plays virtuoso with references to masterpieces of the Roman Renaissance, the Baroque. Pretty splendid architecture for working-class houses.
I'm sure that was the aim of the ACP architects. They wanted not just the solid and healthy houses for the poor, but places the working classes could identify with, feeling a sense of pride and belonging.
Or even where they could be educated about the extraordinary historic heritage of Italy.
Whatever the reasons, walking through the neighborhood, one remains deeply impressed by the high level of architectural details, by the craftsmanship, and the artwork applied even to the simple functional pieces like the iron gates or fences.
In writing about the project, Pirani stated that he had always taken social problems to heart and wanted to build for the people, starting from solid foundations. Economy, he went on to say, does not mean skimping on quality. It means making something profitable in the long term.
One of the challenges of the hilltop site is dealing with the sloping streets and the constant level changes, what in Italian is called dislivello. This is a particular challenge in Lotto 11, the latest and biggest block of San Saba's expansion. Here we encounter the biggest difference in elevation in two ways. First, along the walls in east-west direction, and secondly, north-south, uphill towards the church and the piazza.
The planning team resolved the challenge brilliantly. The section shows it best. The lower outer building side is always higher by one floor than the inner side. And along the sloping Viale Giotto, the buildings step up and vary slightly in height when necessary, between 4 and 5 stories. The outer, taller building belt thus creates a protective wall around the villini and gardens on the hill, in a way mimicking what the Aurelian wall does for the entire city.
The long courtyard of Lotto 11 is worth an exploration, as it generates unique perspectives. In this long courtyard with its plantings and laundry lines, the visitors feel well-oriented and protected. Yet, you encounter a great variety of surprising different side views, either up or down the hill. It feels like walking in the historic streets of Baroque Rome, where you get previews in the next scene without revealing it completely.
The idea to sectionally shift the inner row of the building belt with respect to the outer buildings is brilliant. First of all, it shields the courtyard from the traffic noise, and second, it creates cross perspectives that are visually very interesting. However, also coming from Via Giotto, the view climbing up the stairs between the housing blocks seems longer and more dramatic. It extends visually and guides the visitor into the entrance of the upper buildings, like in a Baroque city, where the movement of the eye is guided by long perspectives ending at the facade of a church.
But here it frames the next housing block. Large decorative staircases with lovely terraced gardens create useful and picturesque shortcuts to the upper homes and those located on the hill. In the 20s, when this was built, cars were not yet a threat to the city, and I wonder if the designers were aware of how beneficial these staircases would be in the future. They are interrupting the flow of vehicular traffic throughout the neighborhood and ultimately protect San Saba from much of the noise and pollution which mars other Roman neighborhoods. It was mostly poor farmers who migrated to Rome in search of jobs in the newly elected capital of Italy. Fleeing from poverty and malaria, many came from small farming towns of the Agro Romano, the rural hinterland of Lazio, but also from various other regions like Abruzzo and Tuscany.
La premessa di tutto il mio discorso è questo, che questo perché si dice è un paese. Questo non è Roma perché sta nel cuore di Roma, sì, certo sta dentro Roma, però è un piccolo paese. Queste case popolari, queste sono case popolari, come sono state fatte col cuore. Mi piace tutto lei. Io sono rimasto solo, mia moglie è morta a maggio.
Mi dispiace.
E questo venire qui per me ritrovo casa, è come se tornassi a casa. Sentire il sole, l'aria e vedere le facce delle persone. Io mi affeziono, gli voglio bene.
San Saba resembles indeed in size a piccolo borghetto, a small village. More than an urban district, it gives you the impression to be a settlement on its own, especially in the beginning when it was the only conglomeration on the two hills.
If it feels a bit like a village, it's like a big city in the sense that people are not sort of gossiping behind your back. But if something happened, if you fell down, everyone would rush to help you. Well, everyone interacts, and that's what I like about it. That's what I like about living here. Life is lived outside the home, very much so. If you dropped a bag, if you drop something behind you when the kids are small and you always lose bits and pieces, somebody would chase you down with that object. It's very human on those different levels of being a part of it, but also being able to go away and still feel accepted when you come back.
When wandering, when taking shortcuts and climbing up the steep staircases and small paths between the building blocks, especially through the Lotto 11, is one not reminded of the medieval hill towns all over Italy?
Indeed, I have the same impression. Pirani evokes playfully the urban characteristics of hill towns and inserts lots of vernacular elements into his architectural repertoire. We have to acknowledge and admire the architect's sensitive approach, his empathy and awareness of the origins of the workers who've left their hometowns and have to adapt to life in the big city. He offers the migrant and urban setting which feels familiar and ultimately like home. It's an incredible achievement. But what about public facilities such as schools or health points? What about shops and other commodities on the hill?
Good point. As a matter of fact, from day one, the ICP cared very much about providing the neighborhood with the basic public infrastructures. Grocery shops were located around Piazza Bernini. A baker and a butcher sit diagonally across the square where the vegetable market was held every morning. Most of these are still here today.
Questo è un paese che sta dentro Roma, è proprio perché si conoscono tutti quanti. Poi io sono un punto di riferimento perché dice andiamo a Pier Prosciutto, andiamo da Mario. L'altro giorno mi ha chiamato una signora, mi ha detto, dice, sto telefonando a casa a mia figlia e non mi risponde. Che mi vuoi andare a suonare per vedere se sta a casa o no? Io ho preso, sono andato io, ho suonato, stavo a casa, il telefonino ce l'aveva basso e non sentiva, però la mamma era preoccupata perché stava a lavorare, allora lei...
The spaces in the lower levels and basements, not suitable for housing, served as after-work meeting places, reading rooms for the women, spaces for political party gatherings, as theaters, as a soup kitchen, a restaurant or a wine shop, etc.
This building in particular is most interesting. Look at the decorative motif and the ground floor plan and guess its use. It's the public bath of San Saba. You can recognize it by the waves in brick which Pirani designed around the building. At the time, all houses had toilets and a small sink, but they didn't have showers or bathtubs. Hence, the ritual was to go to the public bath on Via Giotto at least once a week to have a shower or go to the barber or hairdresser for a cut. There was free entrance for the inhabitants of San Saba, but anyone not a resident had to pay a small fee, unlike the nearby ancient Baths of Caracalla, which had always been free to everybody.
Most importantly though, kindergartens and elementary schools were constructed in all of the big ICP neighborhoods, not least to combat widespread illiteracy. Medical centers occasionally had a separate facility, sometimes a few rooms within the school building, which served as a clinic. Such was the case in San Saba. The Asilo Scuola is a beautiful building in the midst of a large green park with an astonishing view over the city.
Constructed on Lotto 2, in Via Carlo Maratta. Already in 1914, it was not just an ordinary kindergarten and elementary school, but was designed specifically for poor and handicapped children. Santa di Sanctis, one of the first doctors trained in infantile neuropsychiatry, had opened in 1899 the first kindergarten for handicapped children in Via Tasso in Rome. In 1914, the municipal administration offered him the school in San Saba. Both handicapped and healthy children would attend the school, but he also offers his service to 40 mentally handicapped adults in San Saba. His book on infantile neuropsychiatry, published in 1929, speaks about his incredible achievements and the modern methods of treatment he developed during the years at the Asilo of San Saba.
San Saba is an exceptional low-income neighborhood in many ways. It was the first real ICP undertaking and as such made an important statement about the possibilities for healthy, well-designed public housing. Luckily, sufficient funds were available, so it didn't just remain on the paper. And ICP was fortunate to have young, dedicated designers and planners like Pirani, who could successfully develop a model in San Saba, contrasting with the public dormitories and the greedy real estate speculation which was leading to poverty and misery elsewhere in Rome at the time. Pirani is, of course, key to such an achievement. He believed in the dignity of lower classes. His powerful architecture, his strong social engagement, and his enormous respect for the lower classes formed this jewel of a working-class neighborhood which relates to and successfully adds to the historic urban context of Rome.
San Saba today, after more than a century, is still in perfect condition. It hasn't needed much maintenance over time because it was designed to last and has been respected by its residents. Today it still serves as a model for social housing on an international level.